Hey soccer friends, I just want to give a shout out to our partner, Team Player. They are changing the game on how you find the perfect soccer team for your player. Parents, this means no more endless social media scrolling to find information on teams. With Team Player, everything you need to know is just a few clicks away. It's simple, straightforward, and lets you find the best coach and team for your player without any of the usual headaches. And coaches, we all know how tough it can be to get your team noticed, but when you subscribe to one of Team Player's team plans, you instantly get access to set up an online team profile that allows you to reach more potential players and showcase what your team is all about. It's super easy and lets players and parents see why your team could be the right fit for them. And if you sign up using the promo code PITCH, you can try any team plan free for 1 month. So whether you're managing a team or searching for one, come on over to www.teamplayer.us. That is TEAMPLAYR.US. And come give Team Player a look. Family-owned Soccer Innovation is your go-to source for top quality equipment. Whether you're a player, a supportive family member, or a dedicated coach, they have everything you need to elevate your game. For players, their innovative equipment are designed to boost your skills and performance on the pitch. From their agility cones to their portable goals, they have you covered. And family members, they offer durable equipment that's built to last because we know your support is critical to your player. Coaches, trust me, they can provide the equipment you need to run effective training sessions and shape the next generation of soccer players. Visit Soccer Innovations at soccerinnovations.com to start elevating your game with them. And if you use the code PITCH, PITCH, you can receive up to 10% off your next order. Hello and welcome back to Chat by the Pitch. This is Ian Babcock, your host. This week's episode, I have Coach Jeff Ginn from Northern Utah United. Now, you may all be wondering why I have a coach talking to us about his club from Utah. Well, he posted something about a year ago on one of the social media forums, and it really struck a chord with me because I feel like it's the honest truth, and it's not a hard thing or a mean thing to say about coaches, but you'll have to wait until the second episode to catch that part. And I'm sorry not to include it in this episode, but he actually sits down and talks very heavily about how they do things in Cache Valley, Utah. Now, if you know this area, he talks about it briefly, but it's kind of in its own little isolated area in northern Utah. It is a great little community, and what he's trying to do in northern Utah and bring it to the rest of the world is kind of cool. So let's start this chat and head to the pit.
My name is Jeff Ginn. I grew up in Southern California. I had two older brothers that were 7 and 8 years older than me that started playing in the 70s and early 80s when soccer was kind of a really big deal and was just AYSO was just getting going. My first memory and picture is I was 3 years old with a size 5 ball at my parents' feet or at my mom's feet, watching my older brothers play. I played AYSO all the way up through high school. I was never on a select team, which early days, all the girls that were in like 5th and 6th grade with me were part of the California Blues, the SoCal Blues. And so it was kind of always around us, that early stages of what we now call club soccer. I lived in a hotbed of soccer, but I was never really part of the elite level. My biggest accomplishment was at 13 years old, I played on an AYSO all-star team, and that team probably would have been as good as any other club team, but it was a short period of time that we played together. I had a brief stint where I really loved basketball, mostly because of the idea of pickup, and I had a hoop in front of my house, and it was free play. And then I actually got into organized basketball at one point in time and hated it because it was so, all right, here's the play, you're setting screens for this guy and he gets the ball. And I didn't like the coach centered atmosphere. And I gravitated back. I never really left soccer, but it was at that time where I said soccer's really my thing. And it kind of corresponded with that AYSO All-Star team, same time frame. I never really had aspirations to play college soccer. I played high school soccer because soccer was kind of what I did. And I really had a great experience. After that, my brother was up at Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah. And he said, hey, why don't you come up a couple weeks early and get acclimated to the elevation and try out for the soccer team. I played club soccer. That being part of that it made those few years so much better. It was so much more fun. Great friends from that experience. Played club soccer. I went on a church mission and served in North Carolina. And I actually coached a high school soccer team in a little small town called Beulahville in between Wilmington and Jacksonville. Little one stop. It was their first year, and the head coach was actually the basketball coach. Me and my companion were assistant coaches, and the other assistant coach was a Baptist preacher, and so we had a lot of God on our side, as they kept saying to us. Right before I went on my mission, my cousins who live in Provo were 12, 13 years old, 11, 12 years old, and they were playing rec soccer. And their aunt, or my aunt, their mom, had recruited me and my brother to coach a rec team. My first game I ever coached, I had my wisdom teeth pulled out that morning. And so I had gauze and was hanging out. It was pretty hilarious. My brother continued to coach, and he ended up coaching collegiately and did it for a while, and then he kind of moved on from soccer. But the time I was coaching my high school, or coaching out the high school in North Carolina, he had transferred his recreation experience to a club, and they started a new soccer club called Celtic Storm, which is now called Utah Celtic. And I got home from a mission, and my brother got me in what was then an E license course and a D license course, and they handed me a U17 girls team, and it was the funnest thing in the world. And then the next year I was asked to coach at Timpanogos High School and coach a U13 girls, what was then referred to as a B team. And the B team was the second team to an A team that won 6 state cups in a row.
Wow.
A lot of incredible players coached by one of the best coaches I've ever been around, in Robin Bretzing. She was phenomenal about identifying talent and developing talent, and I kind of just got to watch. And then I got really invested in it, and my girls were getting called up to replace their injured girls or girls that were out of town for certain events or whatever it may be. And I kind of got mad because our girls went to the semifinals in State Cup and they won. We didn't ever see them. And then we went to the semifinals 3 years in a row. And then the fourth year we lost in the quarterfinals to our A team. We almost matched up with them 3 out of those 6 years in the finals. We were also giving our best players to them to then compete with us for those events. And so it was, in my naivety, I hated it. Now, after 20 years of experience from that time, and I'll give you some insight. I wrote a heated email that was pages long of how my kids were getting robbed of the opportunity. 20 years later, I've apologized multiple times. I run into her quite a bit. And I've learned that it's really not about the team. It's about the individuals. And when I first started coaching, there was an ego involved, meaning I was fragile. I didn't have confidence in myself. And so winning was a way for me to say I'm good. And I felt like as I went on to coach collegiately in Iowa, my perspective changed when I went to a U.S. youth soccer convention in Missouri. And I went into I would say I actually accidentally went into a course. I can't remember who led it. It was someone from Florida, but he says, how do you develop an academy in your club? And I'd just been asked by the local colleges or the local high schools, hey, how come all these Utah kids that you're recruiting are better than our local kids? And the local kids were good, don't get me wrong, but we were getting the bottom end of the rosters of the state cup teams to come out to Iowa, and especially on the girls' side, and very comparable on the boys' side. Eventually, my response was, well, you guys don't have a club. You guys need to start a club. Well, that ended up falling on me at 26 years old to start a club. No experience in it other than coaching club. Started a club in Council Bluffs, Iowa. Still runs today. Something I'm super proud of. And anyway, I was right at the beginning of starting that club experience, and I went into this meeting, and the academy conversation really opened my eyes up to the potential of developing and changing the culture in America and locally, by implementing strategies locally that are used globally. The concept was not to copy and paste other countries, but to use other countries as a resource for ideas that you can implement in your community, not to just copy and paste one country's. And that has really been a foundation for me in all that I do. Our club is based on multiple ideas from multiple countries, some more dominant than others, but I've become very fascinated with how other countries or other clubs develop or even manufacture environments for players to just thrive in. I first fell in love with Ajax. It was the original academy exposure to player development, and I remember watching YouTube videos or around this time of them doing line dancing. You can still find that on YouTube. It's crazy, but line dancing was part of their curriculum for the first team all the way down to the younger teams because it taught them rhythm, and it was a fitness thing that was out of the norm. Anyway, it just spawned so many ideas on ways that you can help develop individuals, and it's not just about your soccer. It's bigger than that, and it's there's just a lot of components to it, and I'm fascinated by all the components. So that's kind of how I got here. I eventually left Iowa. I came back to Utah. I moved to Cache Valley, Utah. I transformed a soccer club that was looking for some direction. And then by chance, one of the parents of that club became the owner of Real Salt Lake, and I kind of had an in. And I was very lucky and very unprepared that I got to go be a goalkeeper coach for the USL sides, the Real Monarchs, in their inaugural first 2 seasons. And then my third year with them, with Real Salt Lake, I was a goalkeeper coach for the academy. Those 3 years were, let's just put it this way, I got paid for the best education I could possibly get. I was exposed to a lot of things that I don't appreciate, but more importantly, I found a mentor in Freddie Juarez and Bing Ilara, and even the kit man, Cappy. Those guys shaped who I am today in a more sophisticated way. Instead of just thinking 8 to 12-year-olds, which was my focus prior to that, I have a much better perspective of what the end product looks like at 21 to 25 to 30 years old, because I was saturated in the conversations and observing. And like I said before, I was not prepared for that environment. But it was the best thing that happened to me in regards to being able to mature, was being completely challenged, taken out of my comfort zone. I tell this story. The first thing that happened when I showed up was Freddie, who was just finishing his French national license, looked at me and he gave me his whole curriculum, and he said, design a training session for this topic. And I might as well have been reading German or French or some other foreign language. I did not know what he was asking me to do. I sat on it. I did my best. I came in. Here's what I got. And he goes, all right, did you think about this? Over a week, I finally got that training session done, to his liking. And then he said, now go put it in a PowerPoint presentation where the little circles move. And never had done that. So he like really challenged, like he's introverted, but he just put me through the grinder. Um, and he did not give me a lot of I won't say respect is the right word. He did not value me until I earned it. And there was a turning point where I knew that I had kind of won Freddie over, but it was the I think that it was, I don't know if he did it on purpose. I've never had the conversation, but he made me go out of my comfort zone so much and challenged me so much that my whole perspective of how players develop and teams develop and culture exists changed drastically. And it was because he made it hard for me. It was never comfortable. But I will say, once I got in, once I proved myself worthy, I say that very proud, because I don't think it was something that was, like I said, I wasn't prepared for it. He and I have a great relationship now. He has a lot of respect for me. If I, he's up at Seattle now, we still keep in contact. I run things by him. He'll occasionally reach out to me as well. Point being is, I also found the value of mentoring in this process. And at the end of my time here at Real Salt Lake, I came back to Cache Valley, and took a club that was full of independent teams, and eventually through state kind of mandates, and partially our vision, we put all those independent teams into one club about 3 years ago, and we're sitting around 110 teams with about 1,200 kids. I'm the only full-time person. This last summer, we hired someone that's, I consider her full-time, but she's not. She does do more than she probably is paid for, time-wise and energy-wise, and she's awesome. And we're just at this point where we're trying to mature the club out of a what I call a mom and pop club to a little bit more structured, clear club where the fees are clearer, the purpose of our programs and teams are clearer, and we're just getting to the point now where I think is valuable, and I think we're behind in what I wanted to do, but we're at the point now where coaching, investing in our coaches is now really the clear priority. Is that the vast majority of our coaches are novice parent coaches, and a lot of the times they just kind of make things up as they go, and then 10 years later they go, oh, I finally get it. We are turning our focus to coaching development, and hopefully down the road, coach acquisition, experienced coach acquisition, to start putting a little bit higher levels of play available and coaching available for our kids, while maintaining low costs, by having the vast majority of our coaches be volunteers. It's kind of where we're at.
That's impressive. Now, with that being said, Northern Utah United, correct? I have that correct. It is, from my understanding, from what I've read and gone, and what you just talked about, you have two paid employees and everyone else is volunteers. Are you guys planning on changing that structure eventually to paid coaches? And I know Utah's a different, I call it the Utah bubble. Growing up outside of Utah and visiting Utah every summer as a kid, the culture there is different. So is the struggle there because of the community and how the community is structured? Like eh, soccer is a 7 day a week program, and I know growing up, I know I being growing up LDS and growing up in that culture, Sunday's a very sacred day. Is it hard for you guys to have? I'm running around the rabbit hole here. To have parents come out and play on Sunday, because tends to, because everything else in the country is played on Sunday. Do you guys struggle with that then?
When I first started coaching, it was almost impossible to get kids to go to tournaments on Sundays. As the soccer culture has evolved, and the level of ambition in players, coaches, clubs have evolved, and the demand to play on Sundays, to play at a high level, has kind of changed, and maybe even become more convenient or accessible. it's still a challenge. But we generally find that there's enough kids that are ambitious and talented that want that experience. Our hard part is that we try very hard. Our club tries particularly hard, and I think other clubs in the state do too. Try not to force people to play on Sunday until they decide that their ambition matches that level of commitment, right? There are still some of the most ambitious players in the state that don't play on Sunday. On the good side, we get a day off. Everywhere else doesn't have a day off. It is nonstop, 7 days a week. No one expects us to do anything on Sunday, to the point of if we were to run a Sunday, like, hey, let's get together Sunday training program. We're not sure how it would be received. There would be there would be a handful of people that want to, and a handful of people, or the vast majority, that would just continue on and say, no, we don't do things on Sunday. But as they get a little bit older and they start recognizing that they're good at things or good at the sport, those players that have desires to perform at that level, whether they want to go to college or not, or play professionally or not, they tend to go for it. Some still don't, again, but we as a community try to make it so we understand it, but we also have to understand, and this is a hardship. I actually have this hard problem with my brother, who's in Colorado, that just got done raising all of his kids playing soccer. Have this conversation. If your kid wants to play at a high level, there's some sacrifices that you have to make. And in our state, playing on Sunday is one of those things that eventually you have to do. There's ways around it, but it's really, really, really hard to be playing on a top level team that is getting recognized by coaches, so on and so forth. So those that are ambitious tend to gravitate towards that later. And then we try really hard not to force them until it's quote unquote important for them to be playing on Sunday so they can get exposure.
That's because it's all about the development. That's the conversation I hear from clubs. I always ask, it's like, how do you promote development from your coaches and your club's philosophy through on down, from the tops on down, the philosophy of development? Because when you're at U13 and younger, U14 and younger, development's key. Because once you get out, I call it the golden years. That's how it's described to me. Is if they don't have the development, they can't progress as a team on a team level, and they just can't jump in on a high level team. If they're a high level player and jump on a high level team, that's equal talent. If the foundation's not there, the growth for that player on that squad will never be successful. And I find Utah to be in a unique situation because of the culture and the community there. And it's just a different aspect that you guys have to think about than here in North Texas, because every weekend there is a game, Saturday and Sunday, and there's a tournament every weekend somewhere in the Metroplex here in DFW, and you just can't get away from it. And culturally speaking, that between the two worlds, that's where I see a big difference. But as you grow with your club, and you said you have two, are you guys planning on, I guess if you have as many I can't, I didn't write it down. It was 100 and how many teams you have?
Around 110.
110 teams. You have enough possibly to fill an ECNL slot from the sounds of it, then on at least a boy or girl side. Is it something you look forward to doing, or is it something that
we're currently playing in the Yellowstone Premier League and the Desert Conference League? We definitely want to get to the point where we have one of those leagues attached to us, but we also don't want to force it prematurely. If we don't have the players, parents, coaches that want that experience, we don't want to shove it down their throat and do something that they don't want to do. However, we also have the responsibility to provide the top end players an environment that they don't have to leave our community. Historically, our best players drive 50, 60 miles south out of the valley to go coach for or play for higher level teams in higher level clubs. And one of our goals is to create an environment that is reduced drastically year after year. And part of that is by increasing the opportunities locally at both the higher level and the lower level. It's a tough one because I think from a player development standpoint, you want to always make sure that you're pushing players into the right environment. And sometimes we don't have that environment here, and we have to be okay with sending those players to a different club if our environment doesn't work. We have to be we have to have a conscience when it comes down to that individual, that what I would refer to as the coach that the player that coaches use to get wins, right? We have to be okay with letting that kid go, whether it's outside of our club or hopefully on a higher level team within our own club, which is really the core of what we're trying to do. Is we're trying to create an environment that no matter what level of play you're at, we refer to as IVI, or individual vertical integration, where players can move fluidly in the club based off of their needed experience, meaning that experience is based off of their two things: their development needs and their ambition, meaning even though you might be good, you may not want the higher level experience. Our job is to guide them to recognize that, all right, this environment might slow you down. This is the environment we think is a better environment for you, whether it's up or down, and then let the families decide which they want to do. And that's a hard one because we want to force what we think is right on them. And the hope is over time, parents and players get used to a more fluid club experience, and they don't feel trapped by a single team. I think that one of the big downfalls that we have in our culture is that everything is team-based. There's a great book called Coaching Outside the Box, Changing the Mindset in Youth Soccer. One of the very first things it says in there is the old traditions are what is basically what's killing our youth soccer experience. And teams are the foundation of that old experience. Where Europe kind of gets it right is that they're all excited. I went to Portugal about a year ago, and everyone's either a Sporting Lisbon guy or a Benfica guy, right? And it's usually because their kids went into that club in their youth and participated in their youth program. They have a club affiliation pride, not a team pride. It's very similar to what I would refer to as, and Texas is probably very much like this, we cling to our high school, right? We have this huge pride about what high school we went to. What I think has to change for soccer to really evolve is we have to start becoming proud of the club that we're in and identify as, I'm a product of Sporting Lisbon. I'm a product of Benfica. I'm a product of North Texas Soccer. I'm a product of Northern Utah United. And there's something that goes along with that, right? I think that that's really a big downfall, is that we are so stuck on team success that we've lost the environment of what a club should be, which is an organization that opens doors for players to be in the right environment to match both their ambition level and cater to their abilities.
It goes back to something you talked about earlier, pushing your ego aside. I think coaches have to let their ego and be willing to let their talented players to move on. Or if they don't have the right talent on their team, that's a high level team, by letting go of someone that has been loyal to them. I mean, this is the reality. If you get to a certain level, I think the quote from Soccer Dave was, if we can teach our players to survive the game, what is it? Yeah, survive the game, they'll be able to survive the sport. And the sport's the business side, the game is the actual game. And I think coaches have to let parents understand, like, this is truly how it will be when they get to the next level. And if it means losing a top player the next level to the next level up, they have to let them go. My son's coach says, like, if we're not providing the best service, we will have to go find him like a better team within the club. I mean, Solar, he plays for Solar. It's one of the largest clubs in the Metroplex. And there is a depth range. And his goal is to take the team that he's on right now to be the third best within the club. But he goes, if you're outgrowing my team and my coaching, it's time to pass you on to the next level. And I think that is, and this coach is only 30. And I'm putting the age with it because I think that's important, because most young coaches will say, no, I'm holding on to this player because I need this player to make me look good. And he's like, no, if they're outperforming me, I need to let them develop so they can meet their next goal, their next ambition.
Right.
And excuse me, and they have to be able to let go. You said that was something that you had to learn with the high school team. And I think reading through, and I'm reading through your PowerPoint presentation you shared with me, you talk heavily about shifting the mindset from the player centric more towards the coaching centric, of better educating coaches and better having them better understand. So with that being said, how do you push that mentality to your coaches that you work with? I mean, with 110 teams or so, you must have at least 30, 40 coaches, if not more.
100.
100 coaches. So that's one coach per team almost.
Volunteer between head coaches and assistant coaches. We have over 100 volunteer coaches. A handful of them ask to get paid by their teams, but it's not a club fee. It's they ask the players to pay for them. To answer your question, you know what? It's an ongoing question. I'm currently working on a presentation with Jessica, who's part of my staff now, to implement some strategies from Todd Bean's book called Clear Coaching. And basically the premise is, we've been here for about 3 years as a club, meaning that we went from all these independent teams to a club. A lot of the younger teams have been with us from day one. They've kind of been through from 4-year-old to 11-year-old. Kind of have been hearing all of the information, the club philosophy. And so there's kind of this younger group of coaches and parents and players that get what the club is turning into. And then we have a lot of coaches that are still feel independent, and rightfully so. That's how the culture was when they started coaching. We don't look down upon that. We try to support it and also make them feel comfortable that they can take advantage of the club philosophy at the same time. But there's two strategies going on. We have a training program for the top level teams, and it's partially mentoring them to understand what our game model is, how to train it, and then implement it. About a dozen teams do that. It's very clear on what is being done in the thirds of the field at the most foundation level from a team perspective. And we repeat those 3 principles in the attack and 3 principles in defense a ton. That's the way we're not muddying the water. We're really clear on what we want to have happen in each third of the field. And then we let the coaches manage it how they want. We don't micromanage them. We give them the framework, we give them a model, and then say, hey, we've created a foundation for you to build on, put your own spin on it, right? One of the best compliments I got a couple years ago was, when you watch some of our NUU teams play back to back to back, you would never know the previous game ended, because tactically they're trying to implement the same things. Now, that was a small sample of our teams, but it was a really big compliment, because that's the end goal. Is that when you go out there, regardless of what jersey we're wearing, you can be like, that's an NUU team, because they're playing this way, right? It's consistent. If a player jumps from one team to another team, they're jumping into the same terminology, the same expectations. Maybe they're heightened or lowered based off of the level of the team, but the expectations are to learn the system, the foundations of the system, and then maybe adjust to the level of play and the expectations of the personal expectations of the coach. That's for the older teams, older coaches. The younger group, we've been spending the last 4 years kind of changing that mindset, like I said before. And we are at a point where I'm actually setting up, where, like I was mentioning, Jessica and I are working on a presentation at the end of January where we're going to use the model from Todd Bean, and we're going to basically be like, we need to simplify our coaching strategies. Too often we are every week a new training session, and you have to explain the training session for 10 minutes, and then it takes them 10 minutes to grasp that training session, and then it takes 10 minutes for the coach to actually say something, or they've muddied it even more by trying to correct everything before they even get a chance to understand the activity. We're trying to get them to be clear that if you just run 10 to 20 training sessions a year and you duplicate them and they're game-like, then you can actually coach and you can actually see progress because you're not wasting time on new activities. You're duplicating an environment that is relevant to the game, reflects the game. It's an activity that they're familiar with. And now the coach has two big responsibilities. One, sit back and observe. Where are they at? Right? From last week to this week, did they grow, or did they fall behind? Did they forget? Do we need to encourage them to remember? But for the first 5 or 10 minutes, you just got to sit back and watch and see if they get it, or if they're getting it, or if they don't get it at all. And then you go back in with your coaching points. Sometimes it's review of what you've talked about in the past. I would say most of the time it's reminders of things that you've taught, and you repeat those principles and repeat those keywords. And then eventually the kids are like really efficient at a certain thing. And then the next thing is to, all right, what's the next thing? How do we do this next? So an example of building out of the back. Our first thing is we identify the process of how we build out, like where are our priorities? When the goalkeeper has the ball, where do we want to go first? If that's not an option, where do we want to go second? Where do we want to go third? And we do that not to make them robots, but for them to actually start reading the game and making decisions based off of numerical advantages, and spacing and angles of support. And then once they kind of get that down, we go, all right, we want to play through our goal is to play through our 6, 8, and 10. So how do we create the same activity, but make it so the focal point is your 6, 8, and 10 are getting the ball? Well, we put 2 different groups together of 3 midfielders. We throw them in each time, and these 3 midfielders are competing for how many times they get the ball, while the other 3 are sitting and counting, right? And then you switch them, and then you count how many times they get they get the ball. And now you've made a competition of 3 players of midfielders and 3 players of midfielders. And the focus point for the teams that are now also alternating with those midfielders is to beat the other team. So you've created a competitive cauldron in a team function that forces them, without me telling how to do it, I just tell them what the goal is. I have to sit back and observe, and then maybe make some minor adjustments, and usually talk to the players when they're sitting out, not when they're actually in, right? And then from there, they have to play through the 6, 8, and 10 and find a 9 and a 10, 9 or a 10, or sorry, the 9. Sometimes we do double 9s. But they have to go through, the 9 has to get it. And then from there, it's the same activity, but now we add the counter goals. And now they have to play through the 9, who has to get the assist to the wide goals. And that player has to one touch it into a mini goal. The activity is identical. We've just put emphasis on different parts as they've gotten better at the activity. And so they're organically growing through something that's familiar to them. The coach isn't having to reinvent the wheel, and the coach has a comfortable environment where the players can just jump in and play, which is a big, big thing. And then the second part of it is the coach now has to scratch their head and go, what do they need next? And so that observing time is super important. And then the stress, the struggle of going, what's next, is where your coach grows. Is my favorite thing is when my coaches come to me and go, what if we moved the goals here? What if we made them have to take 2 touches instead of 1 touches, or 3 touches or 4 touches? I love that when the coach goes, I'm going to own this. How do we make this more game-like? How do we make this better? You know, is the 1 touch a good thing? 2 touch a good thing? It might be in this scenario. It might not be. That's where as a mentor, I get to come in and instead of telling them what to do, I get to be like, well, here's the advantage of a 1 touch. Here's the advantage of 2 touch. Here's the advantage of multiple touch. And that's where the real growth comes. That is a long process. And I'm hoping that there's another 5-10 years of that process with this new group of coaches and some of our current older coaches that can recycle with that experience, knowing what's coming down the road. And synergetically, we start actually becoming a soccer community where we're really proud of what club we are based off of our principles, our values, how we play the game, how we appear, how we compete, regardless if it's at the lowest level or the highest level or anywhere in between. That's the end game, is can we get the soccer community to really see the value of identifying as a member of NUU and it'd be excited to say I'm an NUU member.
What you have described is really the philosophy of any major club in the United States. Pro club, let me rephrase that. Pro club's academy level. And when you go to other clubs, they don't always have that structure set all the way through. I can give you examples here in North Texas where every coach is doing their own philosophy and there's nothing unique. And the only time you get something very unique all the way through is when it is I call them the smaller independent clubs, because they all practice together. They all have the same philosophy. They only bring in coaches with the same philosophy, are willing to take on the philosophy of the club and not deviate from it. And what you're describing is, to me, is what you see in the MLS academies here, or if you go to Europe or South America and actually understand what they're doing, it's the same philosophy, it's the same playbook all the way through, and that's very impressive that you have that already instilled into your program and the coach is willing to take it on, because like you said, a lot of them are volunteers.
I'll clarify, not everyone's bought in yet.
Right. It
Not
takes
everyone
time.
has been, and also not everyone has been exposed to everything. It's been a process of how much can they, like, I'm commonly told not to make them drink out of a fire hose, right? It's a process of, to change culture takes 10 years. I would say we're in year 3 of year 10 to really get to the point where all the coaches feel like they're really proud of being part of our club. All the players are really proud of being part of our club, right? So although the framework is there, getting there, although some people might think it's impossible until it's done, right? And I think that we're creating an environment where it can happen holistically, but be very powerful during the process and obviously when the process is complete. And I say complete very shallowly because it never really is complete. In 5 years, I'm going to want to change things because I'm going to grow, I'm going to mature, right?
Now, as a DOC do you see, I know like you said, it takes a lot of time because a lot of people have to buy in. I mean, when you have over 100 coaches, that's a lot of people to buy into it. And you might only get 1 or 2 a year some years, and you might get 15 the next. But how do you plan on continuing this philosophy? Because I'm looking at this from my perspective here in North Texas, and the clubs are constantly merging here. And that, I think that's part of that major issue, is that these big clubs will go out and merge with these smaller independent clubs, because these small independent clubs have some phenomenal coaches and some phenomenal players on those squads. And they're trying to eat up the talent, so to speak. And I feel like it hinders the soccer community. I mean, do you feel like being one of the larger clubs up in Cache Valley helps the area become a better soccer community, or do you feel that the small independent club feel with inside the club is very helpful?
Loaded question. I'm going to hopefully be as brief as I can. I once saw a study that in Europe, there's a club per 150,000 people per population.
Wow.
Right. And therefore, with that 150,000 people, everyone has, they're all stakeholders, right? They're all excited to be part of that club. We're watching it with Wrexham. If you're watching Wrexham FC, the TV show.
Yes.
Welcome to Wrexham is what it's titled. You're watching that. The whole town is Wrexham fans, right?
Yes.
We don't have that culture. For me, the biggest struggle is those clubs that you talked about welcome new teams in without any expectations of adopting the culture or the philosophy, right? It's a money grab, bring them in, we're going to take them, and we're happy that they're here. When and if we bring an entire team in, we want them to adopt our culture. We're not just happy with them joining in, right? So for me, in my environment, I think I would even say one club for multiple sports like they do in Europe would be fascinating and very beneficial. I think that our little community, if we were to take the best athletes, whether it was football, baseball, basketball, soccer, every year, they'd win a state title if they all got all of the talent in our community to go compete with the rest of the state. Year in and year out, we have the talent, we have the athletes, we have the coaching, we have all the resources. I even think at the point where when they get to teenage years, I don't even think they would need coaches. They would just need a common philosophy and a united desire to work together, regardless of what part of the community they're from. So I strongly believe that having a unified community is the most important thing. Bigger is better because now your player movement, that individual vertical integration, with numbers, you have more options for your players to move in and out of those different levels of play. I'll give you an example. Right now, when we play rec soccer, you're U9 and you're stuck U9. And whether you're on a good team or a bad team, which could be offset by one team has an all-star fast player that scores all the goals for their team and everyone else is just as good as everyone else, that good team is now playing against the other good teams and the bad teams are playing against the bad teams. Well, in an ideal world, we would not set up individual teams at those ages. We would create a club and then we'd have a schedule and then we would send kids to the different level of play or different level of competition on a weekly, monthly, annually basis. Annually is ridiculous to me because of the growth up and down, right? So ideally, it would be nice to be able to have a gaming environment. And that's a whole nother topic is our gaming leagues are totally structured for team success. And then we're preaching individual development. If we were to change our gaming league structure in a way that allowed player movement fluidly, it would work out a heck of a lot better. But the hang up is, are the clubs willing to change the old ways, which everything is based off of one coach, 12 to 18 kids on a team, and then they're their caretakers, right? I think a club's responsibility is to nurture every single kid and have the flexibility of player movement constantly in and out. And then it goes on to the next level is if the state was to adapt that, I think ECNL and those ABC leagues do that. As long as they're in your club, you can bring them, right?
To a degree.
Right. So, yeah, they have to be signed up for the league.
Right.
Yeah. But there's fluidity there. Why don't we have fluidity for our 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years old when they're just going through the learning, the love process? Right? Instead, we're trying to force kids to win prematurely, usually based off of one or two players that tip the scales in their favor. And it's not helping anyone.
I get what you're saying, but this comes back to the club ego then, because if you're doing something like that, you're going to have, we've seen it here in North Texas. Some leagues allow so many guest players per game and for the season, and all of a sudden you have I would say third tier league here, all of a sudden getting top MLS players and ECNL players coming down to go play in it, to go stack that game so they can go win to make themselves look good.
Right.
And that defeats the purpose of what you're talking about. And I
Correct.
don't, I don't see in our culture here in North Texas of that ever happening unless there is a true regulation like they do with, you would have to keep good stats for players, because you can't bring a ringer into a game that you know that this player is going to do very well into a lower level division. And I don't think until we get personal stats for players, I think that's going to be a very hard philosophy, because not to be mean to any club, but people are human and people want that win. And where, like we talk about, is wearing that Gucci purse on social media. Look at what we did. And it really defeats the purpose of development. When I talked to Dennis Genus, and he talked about how the academies were run in Europe, they don't keep score in a lot of games because they get points by achieving what they were working on in practice, not so much putting the ball in the net.
Right.
And I think we have things wouldn't fly here. My daughter plays for Villarreal, and they have a weekly meeting, and they asked in a meeting one time, like, how do you get players to developing at a young age? And I said, take the ball out of the equation. They don't need a ball until they're 7 or 8. And the coach goes, well, my parents would lose it.
Right.
And because the culture here in Texas is all about winning, and it goes back to that being prideful in your high school and things like that. Everything is about winning. If my kid's on a team, they need to be winning and they can't be losing. And if it's only 1 or 2 kids winning the match, your kid's not developing, and
right.
It's very hard.
Hey everyone, I hope you all have enjoyed this week's episode, and I hope you guys are ready for part 2. I know I just cut it off. I know that was mean, and I know that you guys will be chomping at the bits for next episode, but I'm truly trying to keep this to about to an hour max, maybe an hour 10, worst case scenario, but it's about an hour and 35 minutes long between the 2 episodes, so you'll have to catch the other 40-something minutes next week. That being said, Jeff shared some great insights on what they're doing in Northern Utah and what he is trying to do and trying to achieve there. And we continue this chat next week. So, hey everyone, if you guys have enjoyed this podcast, have enjoyed what I've been trying to do, the messages that I'm putting out there, please give me some ratings, some stars on all the podcast sites that you listen to this on. Give me a review, share with others. The more I can make this grow, the more I can continue doing this. I'm really trying to make a difference in our soccer community. So I hope you guys have enjoyed all this. And until next time, I'll see you at the pitch.